Oh, no. Usually only one of these that I'm not.
We'll go ahead and call this special meeting to order for USD 348 Board of Education. At this time, I'd like to invite you to stand and say the national pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have an approval of the agenda? Second. Okay. Bill's moved, Tony has seconded. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please say aye. Raise your right hand. Aye. Motion carries 7-0. We're going to do executive session at the end, so we're just going to move past that right now and get right into the work session part. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I know there's, a thing happening this evening. And I'm also acutely aware that there are other things going on. There's been some losses in our community that I know very heavily on people's hearts today. And, we forge ahead because the work we have is important. I appreciate you all being here. We have an incredible opportunity to do some really big things, and that really is dependent upon being diligent and passionate about the timelines we put into place. And I know that doesn't come without sacrifice. And I know the people in this room have already given a lot of time already. So I don't say that flippantly, but we do have an incredible opportunity. We have our outgoing primary center principal, incoming, all in the room, outgoing superintendent, incoming superintendent. Because of those timelines, we've been able to have all those pieces together. And in terms of having this tonight, we had some other folks, Michael Kuntz from Greenbush, appreciate you being here, Dustin Avery from Piper Jaffrey, and also our rec board and our admins. So it took a lot to get this date on the calendar, so I apologize for the inconvenience, but if we get to work, game doesn't start till 8, and we can still accomplish what we would like to accomplish on behalf of the students and families that we serve. Just as a reminder, the large view focus of the board. Doing a strategic plan is a hard thing. We've been at it for quite a while. What's made this process different is that we have had some pauses along the way. For example, we paused to initiate our hiring of our new superintendent and then came back to it. So we're kind of approaching the finish line, but we've been at this, for quite a while. For board members, our job is to receive the data, right? Review, make sure that we were either signing off on things or noting if something philosophically is missing, and then empowering our people to get to work on it. We don't have to figure out every little nuanced detail of that tonight, nor is it really our job. Our job is to identify priorities, remove obstacles, and then empower our professionals to do their job. So if that helps you at all as we dive into this, to know what our role is and isn't, I thought I would quickly mention that. Everybody has had the information coming into the meeting tonight. So with that, before this meeting even happened, we had themes from the feedback we were already getting, the work that we were getting not only from the community, but also from our administration team and students. So there were themes that were already emerging within the strategic plan. One of those themes has to do with facilities and our learning spaces. And so we're going to jump to that aspect of what we're trying to do within the larger theme of strategic plan first. And so I'm going to have Mr. Dorothy talk about this, but we're going to have also Dustin Avery speak first. But we're kind of jumping to that theme of facilities improvement tonight as we dive into our strategic plan results.
So as we look at our strategic plan, it's extremely important that we understand if there's facility things in that strategic plan, which there are at this time. Most certainly in the end, the board will decide what stays and what doesn't. But most certainly in looking at any facility plan, you need to understand where the district is financially with our bond requirements so anyway, with that, I thought, and Dustin had contacted me a while ago about possible refinance of some bonds on top of this anyway. So with that, I asked Dustin if he would come tonight and kind of give us an analysis of where we stand and if the board wanted to approach any kind of facilities kind of financing, what that would look like. So Dustin, if you could.
Yeah, good evening. Glad to be here again and kind of start sharing some information. I'll pass this here that way. Perfect. Well, again, great to be here. And again, this is really intended to be kind of just big picture, high level conversation and discussion. And feel free to ask questions as we go through this. So the financial plan really is something that we review every single summer during the budget year with staff, making sure we're setting the mill levies at the appropriate levels. And I should really look forward to kind of reviewing the information with you. I just think that the district's in a very, very good financial position, which again poses a lot of potential opportunities as well. And so I wanted to spend a few minutes kind of going through the financial plan, going through I guess some of the things that a lot of districts in your position are thinking about with respect to financial parameters, right? So you're thinking about strategic planning. Part of that is capital improvement needs. Really what you're looking for to some extent is what are really the financial parameters that we need to be thinking about as a board as we start thinking about how facilities fit into our strategic plan. And so really this information this evening is really intended to provide you some of that background and some of that information to help you with that conversation. I guess the very first thing I would say, as you get into tab number 1, I know you have a number of things on your agenda item tonight, so I will try to be brief but thorough. I thought this guide would be helpful as you look at tab number 1. It really just kind of summarizes to some extent how I compartmentalize this process. And again, strategic plan kind of being the big umbrella, but then you kind of get into the facility component of that. I kind of look at it as two different phases. Phase 1 is really kind of the phase that you're beginning at this point in time. And so I've seen phase 1 last years. I've seen it last months. It just kind of depends on district objectives, district goals, where you are financially, and obviously some of the urgencies that may come with some of these things too. But again, I won't go through everything in phase 1 and phase 2, but again, as you're thinking about what phase 1 may look like and some of these objectives with respect to the process and the professionals, I thought that may be helpful to kind of illustrate what that would look like. Tab number 2 kind of gets into the gist of the financial plan and some of the biggest variables in the plan, and obviously one of them is being interest rates, right? So 35 years, right, we've had a downward trend in interest rates. Obviously, we've refinanced several times over the last number of years and have realized actually significant savings on refinancing outstanding bonds. The last month has been very volatile. For those of you who follow market conditions, actually probably 6 weeks have been probably one of the most volatile months that we've had in recent memory. It's almost like a really kind of a shift in really what's going on, right? So 35 years downward trend in interest rates. At some point, which may be now, we're starting to see the reversal of that trend and potentially see an increasing interest rates. As we think about capital projects, right, the biggest expense to the district long-term is interest costs, right? So bond interest rates, for example, right, 6 months ago they were 2%, right? We're probably closer to 3.5% today, right? So real interest cost is real dollars to the district, and so obviously interest cost is paid back by taxes, and so we're very sensitive to the fact of what future interest rates may mean in terms of timing and cost to school districts. other variables which I think are very, very relevant and impactful to the school district. Number one, valuation changes, right? So this district's valuation change has actually been very, very strong. So you look at other districts across the state, I would say your trend of what your values are compared to others, so you're well above average. So you look at back last 5 years, you're almost at 6% valuation growth, which I think is strong. 3 years are over 6%. 10-year average is kind of that 3.5% range. I'm always cautious. So when we run projections, I think we take a very conservative approach, because if many of you remember back in pre-2008, right? So pre-2008, your valuation trends were very, very strong as well, right? And so then obviously 2008 happened, and you can really see from 2008 through 2014, 15, fairly flat in terms of valuation trends. So again, I think sometimes we need to learn from prior mistakes, and so rather than assuming that we're going to be growing at 5 or 6% per year, I think we take a very modest approach and assume a 1% growth. And what that means is if we grow more than what we project, that means the mill levy requirement to support bond payments can be less in future years. Okay. State aid on bonds. Important. I don't have great news for you, but it is important. So there's really two different laws. There's a law that pertains to bonds that are authorized by voters before 2015, which applies to all the district's existing bonds. Right now, the state of Kansas pays 34% of annual principal and interest payments. Okay, so what's not paid for by the state on an annual basis is supported by the mill levy of the school district, which is the bond and interest mill levy. There's also now an after 2015 law, and there'll also be an after 2022 law, and I'll explain that as well. So after 2015, the law changed, and I think it's important is the state of Kansas classifies or views wealth by evaluating each district's what's called assessed valuation per pupil. Okay, that drives what wealth is in the state of Kansas. If your assessed valuation per pupil equals a statewide median, you'd be getting 25% state aid. Okay, so from the state's perspective, you're considered a little bit poorer on a per pupil basis than other districts in the state of Kansas, which is why under the pre-15 law, you're getting 34% state aid. After 15, the only thing that changed, okay, is rather than comparing everybody to the median, the state just said we're still going to evaluate every district's wealth based upon assessed valuation per pupil. The only difference is we're going to cap the poorest district in the state at 75% state aid. Okay. Well, the challenge is the poorest district in the state of Kansas on an assessed valuation per pupil basis is Fort Leavenworth, because there's basically zero valuation. Okay, so Fort Leavenworth, zero valuation, very poor district. They can't issue bonds under state law because all their funding for their school district comes from the federal government. Okay, so but they're still included in this calculation, and if they were eligible to issue bonds, the state of Kansas would be paying them 111% of their bond payment. Okay, so we're taking the district that would be getting 111% and we're capping them at 75%. That shifts every school district in the state of Kansas down by 36 percentage points. So that's why you see under this after 2015 law, that's why you see that the district currently receives 0% state aid. We've been working very hard legislatively in the last few years to get this law changed, and had made progress. In 2020, right before COVID, we actually had this fixed to the bill that was approved by the Senate 40-0. Then COVID hit and everything kind of fell apart. We tried again last year, not a lot of traction. We tried again this year. It did get approved out of committee, did not make it above the line. And so when I say fix, so really the fix that makes sense is just if we remove Fort Leavenworth from the calculation, we re-equalize the formula. And now again, you probably wouldn't be back to 34%, but you're probably back in the 20 to 29% range. So re-equalization with no cost to the state. Was approved in the Senate Ed Committee, went to the Senate for a vote, did not make it above the line. So when it doesn't make it above the line, then either the bill dies or they refer back to a committee. It was referred back to the Ways and Means Committee in the Senate. They made an amendment in the committee, and that amendment basically says we're okay with removing Fort Leavenworth, but rather than capping districts at 75%, we're going to cap them at 51%. which by capping them at 51%, it basically it's a net neutral impact to school districts. There's no value in the change. And so obviously there's some political things going on that cause that to happen. So needless to say, that did come out. It was approved in the Senate. It will go into law. It does remove Fort Leavenworth, but again, there's no financial benefit to the district. So long story short, we're still at 0%, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Long-winded version of that. The next page is just mill levy history, and again, I think there's a lot of positive trends here, right? So you think about where the district has been, right, from a mill levy perspective, and where you are today, and I think this is a testament to obviously board policy, staff work on budget. But again, you think about 68 mills, about 68.9 mills is where you were about 10 years ago in terms of overall mill levy. And you can see that kind of where you are today, just below 55 mills. Right, so it's about a 13 mil change in a matter of 10 years. Now, again, some of it's attributed to valuation changes, right? So the district has grown more in the last 3 years than the last 10 years. But again, I think that's just a really, really good from a budget perspective. In terms of just bonds in general, again, I'll just make sure I state this, but so bonds, right, we can't transfer bond dollars collected, any sort of tax dollars collected to repay bonds, we can't transfer that into our operating budgets, nor can we transfer anything from our operating budgets into our bond budgets. Okay, so anything from general fund, LOB, capital, it's kind of its own little animal versus the bond kind of being its own separate thing as well. So financial plan. So tab number 3 is a bunch of numbers. Again, this is kind of the living document that gets updated every single year as we go through the budget process, as we get new valuations, as we get new state aid figures. This is a document that we update and we review with the district during the budget process. And so this has been updated to reflect 2021-22 budget information. Okay, so again, it's a snapshot of where you are from a valuation perspective. It evaluates all of our existing bond payments for all of our existing bond issues. It takes into account that we are getting the 34% state aid on those bond payments. Okay, and then again, this is making, basically this shows that, okay, if we were to maintain the existing mill levy, so the existing mill levy for the bond fund is that 14.491 mills. And part of this strategy and planning is we've always kind of factored in, well, what happens if we drop it 1 mil, right? We've kind of just, from a strategic perspective, have asked that question every single year to determine whether or not, from a budget perspective, that's something the board wants to do. And so what this is saying is that, okay, if we were to keep this at 14.4 or 13, and then 13.5 going forward, are we generating enough revenues to support the existing payments? And the answer to that question is yes. Okay. The column, the second column from your right, is probably one of the most, probably the second most important fund a school district has to manage not only the bond fund mill levy, but overall total district mill levy, right? So I refer to fund balance as being what I call capacity. Okay, so you may recall conversations from prior refinancings. We've always talked about, do we have capacity when we refinance to pay off our bonds early and make higher payments, right? So we've done that a couple different times on refinancings. So capacity can mean make a higher payment, so paying off our bonds earlier. Capacity can mean lowering our mill levy, like we're kind of illustrating here. Capacity could mean just paying cash for our bonds. So we build up cash, and at some point in time, we just pay off all of our bonds early, and our mill levy drops to 0. Okay, it could mean all of the above, or a combination of all the above. Or, in situations we're talking about capital improvement planning as being part of your strategic plan, it really becomes capacity for additional bonds, right? Do we have capacity to make an additional bond payment while still keeping our mill levy the same? Okay, so what I thought may be helpful, again, as there's no, I don't have a project list of exactly what these projects are or how much these projects are, but again, as you're sitting here thinking about capital improvement planning, you're thinking about, okay, if one of our objectives, everything's going to be objective driven, right? From a project standpoint, from a financial plan perspective, I think it's important to say, well, what's the financial parameter if we say, hey, we need to figure out what a capital improvement plan looks like while not increasing the mill levy of the school district. That's what I really wanted to share with you this evening as you're starting this process, as kind of one of those financial parameters to think about. Okay, so that being said, the next page. Yes. Yeah.
So it looks like in 2007, 27, 28 was a pretty big change. Are we paying off an existing bond at that time? Is that what's happening?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely right. So if you look at that column called the total debt service column, you can see that our total annual payments go from about $2.5 million, and they drop to about $1 million per year. Yeah. So just because we're expiring some outstanding bonds. Correct. Absolutely. Good question. So this next page illustrates, and again, depending upon objective, I assume for analysis purposes that the mill levy would stay at the 14.491 mils. Okay, and again, as we think through strategy from a budget perspective, if that needs to be something less, we can always update this accordingly, right? So really what this is saying is that how much could the district layer in with respect to a new bond issue and still keep our mill levy the same, but also make sure that we're keeping a very strong fund balance, right? So if you notice that fund balance column, over time that fund balance column remains very positive and very healthy because, again, there's things that may happen over time that are outside of our control, whether it's a valuation decline, whether there's additional projects down the road. So we still try to maintain a very healthy fund balance there. But what you'll see here is we assumed a bond issue of about $12 million, okay, financed over 15 years. Okay, so if you think back to the original bond issue back in 2008, if I recall, that bond issue was, it may have been 25 years. I think we've refinanced it to pay it off a little bit earlier, if I recall correctly.
That's correct.
Yeah. So again, 15 years. You say, well, and I should note, under Kansas law, we can do a maximum of 30 years is what we can do under Kansas law. I will tell you that there's no, from a numbers perspective, okay, there's no value from going from 15 to 20. The amount that you could afford to do without increasing the mill levy is the same whether it's a 15 or 20-year bond issue. Okay, so for analysis purposes, we just said, okay, well, the 15 is going to reduce our interest rate, right, to provide a lower interest cost. That seems like the logical solution at this particular time. If there becomes other, your feedback may be, well, this is a phase one of a project, but we anticipate phase two in 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Then I would say maybe the 20 years is the best solution so that we have a natural drop-off in our mill levy at some point in time where we can layer in that next bond issue. Okay, so that really becomes a conversation as we get into developing the financial plan around a specific project and a specific plan. We'll start to evaluate some of those options as well. But again, think for just an initial financial parameters, really kind of in that $12 million without increasing taxes, and we assumed an election as early as 2023.
And so, Dustin, this is based on 1% growth.
Yes.
And it says valuation.
Yes.
No state aid help.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
That's correct.
Good. Okay.
The next page, and again, I share this with you just so you can see the value of state aid. Again, it's not going to be changed this legislative session, okay? Now, whether it's changed in a future year to be determined. But if we were getting state aid, which would be about 26%, and I should make note, so athletic projects, so mentioned, depending upon the type of project, there are some projects that aren't eligible for state aid. Okay, and so again, not knowing what that list of projects may look like, if we were getting 26% state aid, about $17 million would be the max no mill levy increase project. So again, fairly meaningful from a financial perspective. And I illustrated in terms of a higher bond amount. If it was 26% and it was still a $12 million project, that just means the mill levy could be lower on the flip side. A few things that I think may be helpful in terms of just board requirements. I kind of think about this in terms of before the board really takes official action to do something. I think there's a handful of things that I think are important to kind of have finalized before we move to the next step, which is taking the legal action to put something on the ballot. I've kind of outlined those items on that next tab, and really it's scope of the project, it's the bond amount, it's your date of election, it's the type of election, how we're going to finance it, how we're going to pay for it, right, and then kind of the construction side of things as well. So those, in my mind, are kind of the key decision points before we take kind of the formal action to put something on the ballot. In terms of ballot options, again, I think there's a couple different solutions. There's general election dates, right, which, as you know, are November. And then there's also special election dates, which must be 60 days before or after a general election. And again, special elections can be both. It can be either mail ballot or traditional walk-in ballot. And so you think about, in 22, which again is not where you're on the process, but districts who are getting ready to say, hey, we have these 5 key points figured out. What are our options? Really, it's kind of late August, early September is kind of the last special election time period. And then after the November election, you're really looking at January of 23 is kind of the beginning of kind of the special election option for 2023. We can only have one special election in a calendar year. That's one of the other requirements. So then lastly, I just did a hypothetical analysis or hypothetical calendar for you just so you can have a sense of what this looks like. But it's, I assumed a spring, as my example in my financial plan, I assumed a spring 2023 election. So I did April of 23 as the hypothetical election date. So you can really see that really between now and really December of this year is kind of the planning and kind of working on those key points, right? And then it's really taking action, formal action by the board at the January meeting to put something on the ballot for April. So really, no matter what election date we end up selecting, it's really kind of a 90-day process. So once we finalize those key points and we're ready to call the election, it's about a 90-day process from the time the board takes formal action to when we can actually have the election. So it's a lot of information in a short period of time, and again, I would say that just again financially, big picture, right? We've been really strategically working on this financial plan for a lot of years, and the district's in a very, very good position, and has done a lot of great things with paying off bonds before they've become due. And again, from a mill levy perspective, it's very, very strong too. So, again, we think about strategic planning and financial planning and future projects. Really, we're working with districts to think about things 5 years in advance, right? To set the budget up accordingly so that you're in a position to have these options, whether it's no project and lowering the mill levy, or paying off bonds early, or there are projects and we can just extend the existing mill levy. Again, I think that the district's in a very good financial position to have these strategic planning, long-term facility conversations.
Dustin, I appreciate all that. This is everything that we asked for as far as hypotheticals and plugging in. So thank you guys for making sure we have all that to review. Do any of the board members have questions for Dustin?
Well, I have one. I see it looks like our current mill levy is worksheet that I set on the mill levy history. What scenarios look like with a potential slight increase? Is there potential at this time to potentially add to, all these options open?
Correct. So we can run. So I think that's maybe the next step would be as you're going through your facility planning process and you're really kind of identifying priorities. for the district, and then obviously by identifying those priorities, there's going to be a price tag with those items. We can certainly run the financial projections to say, okay, if this were to be a 14 million or 15 or 6, we can kind of outline exactly what that means from a mill levy perspective. And then what we do is we provide what's called a taxpayer cost analysis. So let's just say that a $15 million project is going to be a 3 mil increase. Right, we can provide the information that says, okay, 3 mills to the district, whether it's homeowners, ag landowners, commercial business owners, we can provide the specific tax impact as a result of the 3 mil increase.
I think what's important for us, I think the next step that would be appropriate is for us to establish, a committee after we talk about it more. But the fact that we're in a position to potentially bring something forward without raising, that doesn't happen every day. And so it's exciting. Timing is important with that. And so we appreciate you being here tonight.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Does anybody else have any questions before we move on to the next?
Thank you again. Yeah.
Thanks,
yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In terms of, if we decide that is something that's part of the discussion for tonight, but I don't know that we have to finish that right now, but because we want to move to Mr. Kuntz so he can give us the results of the things that we've talked about. But it seems like establishing a committee with stakeholders, from the rec, from the board, obviously our activities and athletic director, et cetera, financial, seems to be that doesn't all have to be hashed out here. But if that's something, why don't we think about who would be on that if the philosophy emerges that that's something that we want to explore, why don't we add that to our list to think about in advance of our regular meeting? Do you think that makes sense? I don't think we have to assign that tonight, other than to say that would probably be the next step to do. Everyone's comfortable with that? Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think if the board is considering any kind of facility improvements across the district, I think you need to get a committee going and then start working on that. And that will certainly some rec people, school district people, community people involved in that, on what that might be involved in that. Because they'll have to be, that's a process to go through that can go anywhere from $1 million to $50 million and then back and forth, so you can get to a place that, well, this is what we could really do. So.
Well, in terms of thinking big picture, the rec came to us and they did all the legwork of identifying here are the needs that we would like to get to work on. And they asked us for some mills to do that. The reason why it's appropriate from a strategic planning standpoint for us to pick a lane philosophically, mills that we give then can never come back, no offense. But if we have an opportunity to do something in a more holistic way that meets the things that are identified in the strategic plan and then some, that's a better use of taxpayer money. And I don't think there's any daylight on that part. So that's why it's relevant. And we appreciate you guys coming tonight too and following this, because we know you're kind of waiting to see what are they going to do, because either way stuff needs to get done. And we recognize that. So thank you for your patience. We're going to kind of pivot a little bit and take this view again with the results from our strategic plan survey and data collection. And Michael Kuntz is joining us tonight for people who might be listening at home as they prepare for the basketball game and they're watching this.
That's right.
With bated breath.
I'm sure. Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
So lots of great news with the survey, and I guess I should say surveys. We had 512 student responses as of 10:30 this morning.
That's awesome.
357 from staff, families, parents, guardians, community business owners. And I think you should be really pleased that you had such a great turnout. I truly enjoyed reading every single comment, to the point that I would just like to propose to you all that if we just want to approve the top page as the strategic plan moving forward, I think you're set. These are all comments from students of varying grade levels, and they're really sweet and fun. And I like to start with something like this because there were so many positive comments about the work and the way that you do the work from kids, from staff, from families. So I wanted you to know that there were lots of positives. There were some really sweet and fun comments too. So I tried to capture a few of those for you here. And for our purposes tonight, the next 8 pages, the first 4 take those themes that we established the last time that I was here, and based on the questions that we asked families, staff, community, and business owners, these are the themes that kind of came up in those questions. We're at the point in the strategic planning process with all of this feedback that we have at our disposal. We're really at the place now where tonight, if we just went slide by slide with those 4 that I have in front of you, and you told me and you told the group and we talked about it, are there some priority areas? Because it is a 5-year strategic plan, there may be things that as a board you want to say, we'd really like this to be a priority and be included on the front end of our work, right? Everything in here is important. So nothing tonight is a decision about important or not. It's about priority, okay? And so if you feel yourself starting to get sucked down into the water, just take a deep breath the best that you can and come back up, please, because you want to keep this at about 30,000 tonight, 30,000 feet, okay? Knowing that we're going to get some specific considerations here, you'll notice as we start to step through this, everything leads with the word consider, okay? We have an amazing response rate. We have an amazing set of feedback here, but these are all considerations, okay? So again, recapping really quick, these next 4 slides, starting with preparing students for success, these are the themes that came from the open-ended question. And I think if we just kind of go one by one, meaning we just kind of land on this preparing students for success page, I'll be quiet and let you talk, ask questions, make comments, and if there are things that you believe individually and or collectively need to be moved into kind of priority status, tell me that, and I'll make some notes. Likewise, if there's anything on here that's a non-starter and it's just a no-go for whatever reason, let's talk about that too. Is that fair? Okay. So I'll be quiet and just see where you want to go next. But we are on the Preparing Students for Success Themes and Recommendations page currently. Everything will find its way into the plan. It's just priority-wise, if you have feedbacks or feedback points for us, that's what we take back for our next step in this process.
I went through and just gave like a score of 1, 2, or 3.
Okay.
1 being my most, not just one thing, but like anything that was 1 was a high priority. Number 2 was medium. And number 3 was that was low priority to me. And my number 1s were the first 2 that consider additional pre-high school or post-secondary planning activities.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like in my number 1s really, I think, have to do with like, our primary goal as a school district is to prepare people to move on to their next step. So anything we can do to better prepare kids for that, whether it's when going to the workforce, the military, or college, giving them, information and ideas of what they can and can't do, to me is a high priority. So the consider additional pre-high school, consider additional ACT prep, and then additional ways to provide more hands-on academically challenging activities.
Okay.
You could read that into, even like the very back one, engaging community business owners for feedback. I kind of like that one. I almost gave it a 1, and I think we already do this a little bit with some businesses in the community, but offer opportunities for kids to kind of get in and see them. But I think we're doing some of that already. Maybe we can do some more.
That's great.
to me, those are my number one.
You led in a perfect way. You kind of had your own scale or matrix in mind, and that feedback you provided, I'm just making some little notes and symbols here, and that's really kind of how this plays out. So if you want to echo anything Dr. Harvey said, yay, that's great. If you have other considerations or things.
I'll add on to that as well. But, looking at the very satisfied, not satisfied questions that are in here too.
Yep.
The graduation rate and the state assessment, ACT performance are kind of middling to low end of how satisfied folks are in the community with those scores. I think it really nicely aligns to having more ACT prep, having more community placements for job training and just more enrichment opportunities for kids at large. I mean, I'll extend that and say after-school activities and all other things that come into that fold as well, but it seems like there's more community concern with that graduation rate ACT performance than there were some of those other categories around that. So questions there.
That's a great point. As you look at the full set of slides that you've had some access to, and to your point, what we tend to look at as we kind of pull all this information together, there's a very satisfied, and not satisfied. It's all important and it's all relevant, but where we kind of go yellow flag, red flag is if we see about 20% or more in not satisfied. That then might inform us here to shift things to priority as well. And nothing has to be put in cement tonight. As we work with your administrative team kind of on this next phase, we will look at this too. And if we miss something tonight, which we won't, but if we miss something tonight, then that data helps to inform some priority shifting as well. So
I kind of saw things in categories because I try to connect dots between things. And I don't disagree with these guys. I don't know that I can prioritize one bullet point over another. I'm seeing a theme of improving instruction, which could also include the things that are SEL, because that's part of instruction, like consider ways to fully support SEL needs, as well as implementation of professional development, because that also boils down to instruction, and teachers getting professional development for that. I see a theme of engaging strong relationships. That would be with students, staff, and families all the way around. And again, there's some overlaps with that, with potential, we know SEL has to do with engaging strong relationships, and also how to help parents support their students at home. And then the post-secondary success planning is kind of its own theme also, although they're all intertwined.
Yep.
Susan, that's exactly what I did. I tried to do a sort of a mental factor analysis here, try to identify the themes and draw them out. And I wrote down the exact same three themes, right? Post-secondary planning, academic challenge, and progressive teaching, and the whole area of communication, right? Communication between the school, teachers, staff, parents, and I tied in the community as well, right? That we want their communication to be enhanced and relationships built. And again, those are three pretty big themes, right? And they all are interrelated, right? So I'm not sure if I want to prioritize them at the moment, but that's what I hold from these points.
Other thoughts?
I don't have much to add to what you two said. I wasn't prioritizing so much. I will admit the communication pieces are the ones that kind of jump to me. It's just what it feels to my way of thinking. But yeah, I think those three categories are kind of the way I was bringing it down as well.
Priorities for me are learning centered, in the sense that, and when I say learning is not just what happens in the classroom, it's what happens with all the other hands-on or activity, experiential learning, I think is very important in the year 2022 and moving on. And anything, so where I come from, that just always comes first in my mind, as far as a priority. I appreciate what you said, that none of these are unimportant.
Yeah.
It's like picking children, they all, they all are good, but if we, as we move this along and focus our priorities, what is it that students most need after what they've been through? I think, the school's job, primarily educators are supposed to educate, and I know they've been called upon to do a lot of different things, so this may be a philosophical discussion for further thought, but, and I absolutely appreciate the emphasis and the response of our staff for social emotional needs. We have to. But I also know that teachers don't go to college to be psychologists. And so in terms of prioritizing, not that is unimportant, not that we can't be responsive to it, because we must, but as a learning institution, my personal, as one of 7, would be emphasis upon learning and teaching. Not in the neglect of the other, but that's not where I see ideally what our priority should be. And I know that may not be a popular opinion, but that is my opinion.
I would note, and this is not to downplay the first 2 bullet points, because I certainly think those are important, preparing students for life beyond high school. But colleges are increasingly de-emphasizing ACT scores, right? So the fact that ACT scores show up in both of those, this is not a high priority for certainly Baker University currently, or colleges across the country, because ACT scores have limited impact on success in college. It's a whole bunch of other kinds of things, and a lot of it has to do with these other 2 points, right? Being academically challenged, lighting fires under kids and wanting them to learn, right? The result of that oftentimes is higher ACT scores, which is good. I mean, I'm not suggesting that's not a good thing, but to focus on these first 2 points and try to really get kids ready for college and college readiness programs, that may be a secondary effect. It may come after this whole idea of challenging them academically, being progressive, the kinds of things we're teaching, that's the kind of stuff we were talking about, and this communication piece, which is getting everybody communicating to each other and pulling them in the same direction.
So I'm going to sort of add on to that in a way here. This whole survey result kind of got me thinking about what's the school's role in providing extracurricular options like Parks and Rec and athletics and music and dance, those things. And I kept thinking, I believe every kid deserves to have a third option to support themselves, like the family, the school, and then something else, Boy Scouts, athletics, whatever it might be. And I think we have some holes in which we miss kids where they haven't found chess club, or they haven't found dance, or
belonging.
And I don't, exactly. I don't know what the school's role is in doing all those, those last 2, like family plus school plus some other activity. But I think we probably have some pretty big vacancies, especially the younger we get. We don't have after-school activities hosted in our facilities, for instance, but we could. And I think I kept seeing that pop up across all these domains here that, kids are looking for engagement and belonging in various ways, and for some role that the school should be filling within that, with our partners like Parks and Rec, for instance. That would be a good. This is the opportunity to have that conversation.
Right. Well, finding what it is that everybody has a reason to get out of bed in the morning, including kids, and their reason might not be math. But if you want to be eligible for that thing you're passionate about, then you'll do we know these things to be true, but finding, I feel like that's baked into our individual plans of study at the high school level, with the goals of that, but I like your point about that, finding your sense of belonging, where that engagement is, because it usually carries over in a positive way to the other aspects of your life when you find that thing. And you want that for every
Yeah,
child.
to Tony's point, like, I mean, I think you do get that academic bump by having kids engage, and I think about myself I was heavily involved in Boy Scouts. I wasn't an athlete by any means, but I was heavily involved in Boy Scouts and learned leadership skills there, and they have translated to this day, right? But if I didn't have that option to me, or wasn't aware that option was out there, I would have struggled more,
Right.
And I think it's probably true for other kids now that, when we have Boy Scout troops, for instance, that fold or reform, or whatever it might be, but make sure all of our kids have some other option besides family and school to be connected to get up in the morning. Because not everybody's in love with math.
Right.
But anyway.
Is that cultivating
great.
leadership? Is that cultivating leaders? I mean, from a 30,000 view, something to think about.
I think so.
I mean, leadership manifests in a lot of different ways, but I don't know. Because we've had this conversation before in our last strategic direction, which is water saying, because I carry it with me everywhere, right? Go back to that when in doubt. But, those transferable skills, communication skills, leadership skills, all of those things benefit you, whether you opt for trade school, whether you opt for an 8-year degree program. I mean, whatever that is, those skill sets are transferable. So maybe it is too simplistic to just make it ACT, I don't know, there might be a shift in what we're trying to draw out there that we might think a little more about.
And some of what you're referencing to, we will see in other bullet points.
Okay.
And part of wrapping this into a final over the next 4 to 6 weeks maybe is making sure the bullets on the second page that could go on the first page end up there as well, right? So
Chris,
these.
you were leading me toward engagement. And
Yeah.
It's coming.
Yep. There's some good points on there. And so what you see in front of you now is grouped only and solely by where the response occurred. We then can move things to where they are more grouped accordingly. And I love how Susan and Tony started to kind of theme things out in their mind, because there'll be other things we can carry in from some of the other items too. What if we shifted into that second one? And of course, if anything comes to you from the second or the first, please speak up and share that. But if we look at supporting the needs of students and staff, you'll probably see some similar themes around SEL as we work into this one, but some new ones as well. So again, just if there's anything that hits you or that sounds or looks or feels like a priority area, just to make sure that we're coming out of the gates with that, that's what our time is for.
Kind of tying in with what Chris was talking about, from the, I think it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I should have numbered these, I'm sorry.
Seventh circle down. Consider ways to provide or offer after-school activity options and tutoring.
Yep.
That was one stuck out.
One right after that's important in today's age as well. I think the retention of our staff, and when we get good teachers, figure out how we keep them.
Yep.
I really like that ensuring students and staff have fun showed up on this as well. I think it speaks to retention and positive culture.
Now, the kids said it a very different way. They talked a lot about ice cream and snakes. Snakes and ice cream, people. That's it. Snakes and ice cream. So the really cool thing as we continue to work through this too is with the student responses, it's the same thing. It's said a different way, right? And so. If you want, we can move into the third one, and of course we can go back to any of them as we go. The third one is the engagement in schools and school activities, which I think hints at some of the things Chris was talking about, but more in there as well.
honestly, I didn't get all these ones. I mean,
Yeah.
there wasn't really anything that I wasn't a fan of or thought less important. They're all really good.
Yep.
Not that it invalidates any of you, right? A lot of these can speak to a yearning for more togetherness after what we've been through.
I agree.
It's a natural
Yep.
thing, and it doesn't diminish it.
Yep.
But it's easy to see where it's coming from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to this page and the last page to those foundational structures for engagement and building those foundational structures for engagement, but not only that, for layered support as well. So having layers of support when we engage for staff and students, especially on the last page. So it's kind of that TSS model.
The ability to, it's difficult, it's kind of implied in the communication stuff with social media and events and activities and all of that. But the ability to tell our story in a way that's cohesive, understandable, but yet also doesn't violate student confidentiality. I mean, it was said to me recently, it's hard to tell the story of the wins that we have because oftentimes those are things that the public will never know, and nor should they, because it's private. And so many of those things, I mean, there are interventions and folks helped in ways that are life-changing all the time, but that's not something you post on Twitter if you're the principal. So how can we tell the story of what is important to our district? Because as we know, when there is a vacuum, it will be filled, and it can oftentimes not tell the entire story. So that communication piece to me is critical with engagement, because you don't engage with something or someone with whom you do not have trust. And so, and trust has been challenged for all schools. This is not a Baldwin specific problem by any more challenge, I'll say. But there have been, over the past 2 years, things are working on folks, and we want school to be the safe place for our students, our staff, and our families, and how we communicate that, which I think kind of puts all of these things together. That, to me, that's a large way of that's what came out to me with all of these, for whatever that's worth.
I wanted to ask, if it's not too going into the weeds on one particular point, our co-op board members, what does that mean to you, additional engagement with the co-op?
There was some feedback in that particular question, just making sure that all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted on what are the services, what are the goals, is everyone on the same page because of the unique relationship with a provider who hires and brings people in. Just there's a lot of moving parts there, and are they all moving at the same time and in the same direction for the same purpose? And that, from the Greenbush perspective, we see and hear about that a lot in the places where we are. So it's not unexpected in a situation where a district works with a co-op.
Yeah, to add to that, there is, especially across Boswell, Eudora, and Baldwin, there's a lot of ambiguity about what the co-op actually does, and how that perception is different for those three communities that we serve. And I don't think it's been intentional by any means, but we're actually clarifying some of these issues with Greenbush's help as well. Probably is it next week?
Yep, next Tuesday.
So we're on the same kind of journey, figuring out what is the co-op's role in providing educational services for student disabilities, but also what's that brand, in other words, like what's the brand of the co-op and for these communities that we're going to serve as well.
I remember bringing those points up when I was on the board a long time ago. It's tricky because you want the co-op to almost be an invisible.
That's where it's tricky. Yeah. You don't know about it until you need it.
Yeah,
and then it's a very tricky kind of slippery stuff we're operating in. But we'll have those debates next week too, for sure.
I appreciate your comment, though, Andy, because it does get you pondering the word engagement in itself. Because we know that we're really good at informing families and people and staff and community. We're pretty good at involving, And in a lot of places, we're good at engaging, but if there are levels. We're not just talking informing, we're not just talking involving, we're talking true engagement, and I think that's really important to keep that separate from just informing and involving. Not that that's not important, because that's important too.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. We can drift into operational effectiveness and maintaining and improving facilities. Of course, we can go back to any of the other ones, but.
I don't have the numbers in front of me. The tagline for maintenance of facilities, dissatisfaction struck me. Is that typically run a little higher than other things, just because people, it's a physical thing they see every day and it's staying in their mind now?
Yeah, and everybody's definition of cleanliness is different, and so to see a variety of comments about that, what we try to do then is stay above that, and there's something. So let's write it as such, and then that analysis of cleaning. Is that what you're asking about? The cleaning procedures and cleanliness of buildings. In a survey like this, where it's open-ended, anonymity is all but guaranteed. You get a lot of comments, and so when we see it once, okay. When we see it several times, we want to bring attention to it. So, but do that in a respectful way that doesn't make assumptions, right?
It didn't necessarily pop out in the theme within these comments here, but I noticed in the actual data from the very satisfied and satisfied, that there was 26% of people indicated they were very satisfied with school safety, and 56% were satisfied. I mean, maybe I'm overachieving here, but I want that to be 100% very satisfied with the safety in their buildings.
Right.
But I want to kind of benchmark that up against what do other schools see. Like, I don't want any kid coming to school not thinking that they're safe. But I don't know what that, what the frame of reference should be in that respect.
Yeah, we have not seen 100% very satisfied on that, because again, there's probably different factors with safety. I can dig and will, because safety is paramount.
Right.
And as we continue to work through some of this, part of the beauty of having all of this data where we have it is when we start to get into the weeds a little bit, someone could say, well, is that this building, this one, or our fourth one, right? And so being able to dig in a little bit and see, does it curve a little higher with one building or another? Okay. So we can definitely peel into that.
I didn't want to extrapolate on it. I mean, it could be crosswalks or it could be entrances or whatever it might be. But just, again, just to not worry everybody in the room here.
Yeah.
The scores are very positive.
Yes.
Just I want to have that
for sure
for everybody's welcome in the school and everybody feels safe in the school. And there are a handful of folks who have some concern around school safety, as well as maybe some facilities as well. But
and I think that's a conversation we need to have, because one thing we've talked about is how can we be more welcoming, but that doesn't mean everybody just gets to walk in. We have new entrances at all of our buildings now for a reason. But that can be off-putting to some who, if you grew up in Williamsburg, Kansas, you just walked in and whenever and it was no big deal. Then that's not how it is now, and that can feel different to people at different times. And that's the challenge of safety, is not just the physical space, it's the human element and how that plays out. So that one is always a challenging one for me to kind of flesh out personally. That one's always hard for me. To figure out.
That's where we try to use that 20% buffer too. Not that that's a static, always and forever thing, right? Because it depends on the topic. And yes, you would want to maximize where you can the perceptions around safety, right? The reality and perception.
So back into the bullet points. Sorry for getting this distracted.
It's all good.
If I were to pull out a theme in here, I think if there is evidence for the creation of some sort of a facilities committee, like we talked about earlier in this conversation too. I mean, there's mention of a wide variety of facilities improvements from the junior high to the high school to heating and cooling. I mean, a wide variety of stuff we could consider in there. So I think it's further evidence of us having a subcommittee created from our stakeholders to have a conversation about bond issues and so on and so forth.
In my mind, again, what I try to do is group these things together, and I saw it in 3 basic categories, right? Cleanliness, maintenance of existing facilities, exploration of possibilities and options for new facilities that we could build. And then there's a couple of items on there about being very proactive about moving in directions of things like recycling and community partnerships for food pantries and things like that, right? And so I try to divide it into those 3 categories and say, we got to pay attention to the facilities we have, but looking toward the future of those 2 areas of what could be.
Yeah, I like those buckets.
Yep, agreed.
And I could boil it down too, because to me, it's stewardship, and then
Right.
moving forward, the other 2 could almost be
Right.
lumped
Right.
down.
There's subsets of the overall.
Right.
Where we want to head.
That makes sense to me.
Like it.
I like the student accountability part. I think kids helping clean up is great.
Yeah, for sure. So what happens from here is I take these notes back, and a couple of things happen. One is these very bullet points at some point soon, as time allows and as schedules allow, I'll work with the administrative team, and we'll kind of do a color coding process using green, yellow, red. Green is something's listed here that's already in motion. And maybe we just haven't communicated that it is, but it just may be something that does not need to go on our strategic plan because it's already moving, it's already going. But yes, we hear you, we see you. We need to communicate more where we're at with that, okay? Flip to the opposite end, we would do red if something is here and the administrative team says, absolutely, we really need to move forward with something like that. We have not yet, for whatever reason, that's going in the plan, done. The middle ground is we're really close to, or in a couple of years we could, and anything that they color code yellow, we'll find a way to get into the plan. It just may be second year, third year, or beyond, if that makes sense. So it begins to become a discussion about priorities, capacity, pacing, and are there things on here that are in place? We just haven't communicated them yet. We can help author some communication out to the community, which we've done in other districts, just so people know that they were seen and heard through the survey. Here's where we're at. Here's where we're going. Simultaneously, we're building out the draft plan. So it's a really exciting time, and it moves pretty quickly from here.
Is that, so I'm sorry, say that again. So you would kind of provide a synopsis of where we're at so far so that we can...
Yes, get it out to the community.
That would be wonderful.
Yep, absolutely.
That would be awesome.
Yep.
Because I want people to be excited about this.
For sure.
Yeah, okay, that would be great.
Yep.
So it seems like then for themes 1 through 3, that's got to be staff driven at this point. And then theme 4 is let's think about a smart way, if everyone agrees, to create a committee for that purpose. Is everyone in agreement on that that's a good step, way to move forward? Not give everybody some time to think about who all needs to be on that committee. Exploratory committee, we'll say. Okay.
Where does the snake budget fit in that?
Yeah, we got to figure that out. Like, is that?
It's right there on the primary center.
Awesome.
Is that facilities, maintenance, or is that
Pet World just lets you check them out, so there's no. It's a no cost solution.
I wonder, do we really have a food item called a breaded beef finger?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep.
We got him here.
Before it passes us up as an opportunity, there are still 4 pages that are disaggregated by your 4 buildings. While we don't need to do tonight the extensive prioritization process and discussion, I do think for any kids that are out there watching who filled out the survey, but even if they aren't, I do think giving it just a little bit of time and pause to see if you have any questions about how a consideration developed, or things or connections that you see between what kids said and what adults said, and how it's kind of the same. They just say it a little more, maybe honestly, truthfully sometimes, right? Without filters. So just as you pop through the primary, center, intermediate, junior high, and high, just anything that strikes you as fun, exciting, enjoyable.
I'm sorry for talking so much, just maybe I'm excited about these results here. I did have a question because it stuck out to me on the high school results here about starting school later. There's a comment in there about starting 8:30 to 9 o'clock.
Yep.
And I don't know the full spectrum of research or why we do what we do for schools, but it's always struck me that we're asking our kids who require the most sleep to get up the earliest and start school the earliest in many cases here. But I don't want to make a decision on that today, but I just wondered if we could, at some point in the future, circle back to that conversation, because I think it is something we're seeing more schools do across the country, kicking back that start time for high school kids, and I think it'd be worthwhile time to reopen that discussion.
I'm pleased that a lot of the things that came in through the junior high student survey responses were have really been represented in many of the letters that we have received. I mean, there's consistency in that as well, just kind of in a representative way. So that's.
Well, I promise you I don't say this everywhere that I go to help do this work, but I really think you should walk out of here tonight feeling really proud about how your community responded and the work that your administrative team did and that you all did to have students respond and to get their responses. I just think strengthens the entire process. There's engagement, there's involvement, there's everything with this. And so, again, I don't get to say that everywhere that I go to do this work. So you all should feel really good about the response rate and what you're seeing before you tonight. Any final thoughts?
So action plans would be kind of a synopsis recap that we can provide to the community. Further work with staff for themes 1 through 3. And then Mr. Dorothy and I can talk about an exploratory committee for theme 4. Does that seem to make sense as far as steps? Okay. I think that's it then.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bet. A lot of fun.
I think I'm gonna frame this front page.
It's so cool. Yeah.
And the concern for teachers.
Yes, I know. I'm telling you.
The empathy in that. I would make it so that teachers would have more breaks so they can refresh their mind. Better funding to pay teachers more. I mean, the fact that came from kids.
Yep. That's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
All right. You know where to find me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Michael.
Sorry.
Just because everybody's here, are there any sort of reactions that anyone wants to? Because we're all in the room, and I don't want you to feel as though you're not allowed to speak or weigh in. If there's something that, and I don't feel any pressure to either, but we do appreciate you all being here tonight because it is important that we hear all the information at the same time. It kind of arms us to move forward. But if you have anything that you would like to add at this time, I would like to invite that opportunity, and if not, that's okay too. Okay. As you guys being the leaders of the district, I think we have a lot of exciting things that we're going to be able to do. So thank you very much. Do board members have anything that they would like to add to this agenda item at this time? Okay. Well, then I'm going to make a motion that we enter into executive session. Do you have anything you want to add, Mr. Dorothy? Okay. Anything? Okay. All right. So we're going to, all right. Everybody had their chance then. Okay. I move we enter into executive session to discuss personnel issues with Mr. Dorothy pursuant, specifically contracts, pursuant to the exception under COMA related to non-elected personnel. And the open meeting will resume at 7:23. Phil seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries 7-0.
Parapet
probably would.
But you're not, you're shrinking your audience.
We'll call the meeting back to order. Is there, well, first, I'll make the first motion. I move that we approve a prorated $400 retainage stipend for classified if they're returning to the district from last year. That's all I need to say. Is there a second? Okay. Bill seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries 7-0. And then I'd ask for a motion for approval of the personnel report.
A motion that we approve the personnel report.
Second.
Phil has moved and Tony has seconded that we approve the personnel report as presented. And as just a note, although it won't be enough, two of the retiring folks on our personnel report that we will be approving represent many, many decades in this district. So in addition to Dr. Elingwin, Mr. Dorothy's retirement, we also have the retirement of Amy Cooper and Patty Eyrick, who have lived life here, raised children here, and have given decades of service and love for students in USD 348. So I wanted to make note of that and thank them for their time here. All those in favor of accepting the personnel report as presented, please say aye. Raise your right hand.
Aye.
Motion carries, and all we have left is the motion for adjournment.
So moved.
And Kelly has moved. Who would like to second? Bill has seconded. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. Meeting adjourned 7:25. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Rock chalk.